Good afternoon, and thank you so much for staying tuned for Freedom at Hand. I am your host, Miss Brenda, for the next 2 hours. So thank you so much for staying aboard for that. To all of my American audience, welcome aboard. And all of those of you listening not only in Uganda but around the world, I thank you so much for being a part of the program today here with me. It's been an interesting day here on Voice of Uganda Radio. I've been able to tune into some of the other programs leading up to mine, and sometimes they get a little emotional, and sometimes, everybody has a voice. Everybody has something to say, and that's one of the things I love about Voice of Uganda Radio, and so happy that I was called to be a part of the platform, is because it's not just one person's opinion that matters here, but everybody has a voice and everybody has the right to be heard. That's a part of starting unity, starting the conversations. Even if we agree or we don't agree, it's perfectly fine because everybody has something to say, and we all need to be respectful of that because it's a large part of moving forward. So thank you so much to Voice of Uganda Radio for allowing me to be a part of their platform and their Sunday lineup. And I appreciate all of you for being a part of the program today. Have quite a few things that I want to discuss here, but today I'm going to go in and out of my Freedom at Hand person today, which is going to be Dr. Martin Luther King. It's going to weave in and out of some of what's happening in the media right now, some of what's happened to our brothers and sisters there in Kenya. I know that we have a Kenyan audience that listens to Voice of Uganda Radio as well. We welcome them aboard simply because we need all of our neighbors. Because when this government changes hands and things start to happen, we need to be on good terms with those that are our neighbors as well. Our sympathies go out to the Kenyan people for the bombing that just happened there in the mall. And we pray for a fast recovery and that they will solve what actually happened there as quick as they possibly can. One of the things that pleased me so much when I was looking at some of what had happened there in Kenya is the quick response to the people, which made me feel so good because, in 2010, we could say the Islamics came into their belief for the bombing that happened there also at the football game there in 2010 where 75 Ugandans lost their lives. It was unfortunate for those victims there in Uganda during the bombing there because they did not have the fast response that they have there in Kenya, which we all know, my fellow Ugandans, those of you inside the country as well as outside, that is one of the things that we're fighting for in justice for the Ugandan people. Nowhere in the world, in the entire universe, should anyone be subject to such a horrific crime and not have a government or a system set in place that there are ambulance, there are doctors, and there's first aid to get those victims where they need to be and to get the things done for them that need to be done. So I commend the Kenyan hospitals, the doctors, the nurses, the first responders, the ambulance, everyone who came together to get these people into a safe haven where they could be taken care of. A lot of what we have seen play out there in Kenya is a lot of what we want to start to see happen in Uganda. The people of Uganda are just as humane and deserve every equality that other countries would afford victims of such a horrific thing happening there, people pulling together. I had a chance to see some of what had happened during that bombing when it did happen there in Uganda under some of the same similar circumstances. And, to throw people on the back of the trucks or people to carry people to the hospitals, however they could get them there, and to, majority of the patients on the floor and not even getting medical assistance. Some of them which could have probably lived had there been a system put in place that would have been there to protect them. So, even though I can appreciate all the arguments and everything that happens here on Voice of Uganda Radio, one of the things that still stands out and rings true is that we have a long way to go. And let's not allow history to repeat itself. And let's not allow history to destroy the way we move forward. I had done part of my series on Dr. Martin Luther King, but I didn't get to finish the other portion of it. That's why I decided to bring him back in now at such a time as this, because when you get down to the root of what has happened in Uganda with Joseph Kony and the NRA and all of that's happening, it wasn't so long ago that the United States of America back in the 1960s were dealing with some of those same things themselves, not as brutal as some of that, but the Ku Klux Klan was very alive back then, and we could say that the Ku Klux Klan was our Joseph Kony, or were they not? Because, on everything that the American media brings up on him, I'm amazed that it just makes me wonder if he's a fictitious person or if he's really out there. Because we know I had Musana on my program a while back, and we talked about camouflage dictatorship. And we know that this government hides behind a lot of things. We know that this government doesn't take responsibility for some of the things that have happened, and they've shifted the blame where the blame should be square on them. But we're not going to go into that too much today. We have enough programs here on Voice of Uganda Radio that really digs into that a little more in depth. But, we do know that things have happened and things have been covered up, and the true stories never really surfaced for years and years and years. It's happening there in Uganda now, and it happened in the United States, back in the 50s and 60s. I will say that the pain and what the Ugandan people are going through is real. No one's going to dismiss it that it isn't, because it is real. And the way that everybody feels, whether you're from the north, south, east, or western parts of Uganda, no matter which tribal sector you claim ownership in, the pain is real for everybody. Everybody knows how they feel, what they saw, the stories that they heard, and the things that they were told, and they pretty much hold on to those things because it's their history. And one of the things here at Voice of Uganda Radio is let's be careful with what we hold on to from our history, because history can harm us or history can move us forward. It's one of the things that happened in the United States of America that we had to be so careful with when we came through the civil rights movements back in the 1960s. We had to be very careful, because what happens today in our society is our youth, we encourage them to look at what happened as stepping stones to getting to a better America, not to continue to be bitter with white Americans or the Ku Klux Klan or whoever caused these injustices for us, but use it as a platform to educate yourself on your rights and liberties in this country, to go to school and do well and exceed and do better than anyone expects you to go on to college and get a good life and a good career for yourself, to go on into the workplace and make your mark there, to make yourself a part of history, even if your history doesn't show up in the history books. Still using everything that has happened as a platform to move forward. So we can, I heard one of the callers say earlier on Charlie's show, we can say that, let's look at it this way. The youth in Uganda have moved forward. They are not aware of a lot of the hurt, a lot of the pain, and a lot of the bitterness that is felt between the tribes and between the regions. They know that there's some unfairness, but they're not as scarred by the history of all of that as a lot of our callers that call in are. Because the history of what happened in your past is still very, very, the wounds have not healed yet. And I can tell that so much from the callers that call in, that the wounds are still open and they're not healed. And some of the wounds are stitched up and they still are not healed. Because some of those things that you talk about are really horrific. Those are some horrific crimes, and that is a lot to overcome. But I understand and I know that you can overcome it. The youth in Uganda are going to college together now. and they're playing together, and they're going to discos together, and they're eating together, and they're conversating. So a lot of what the anger of what most of our callers are feeling, a lot of the youth in Uganda are past that. The same way with America, a lot of our young kids here in the United States of America, they know about slavery. They know what happened in the 60s. They know about Dr. King and Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman and a lot of our history. And we encourage them to use that history to move forward, not to use that history to go backwards. Because one of the things I feel like is happening now is we're having to take a couple of steps backwards again before we can move forward. And that's okay here at Voice of Uganda Radio, because we understand that at sometimes the platforms are going to get a little heated. And at sometimes people need to address and talk about things that need to be talked about. But if we take those steps backwards, let's not forget that our goal is to move forward. And it's not to continue to hash out and live in the past of what has happened. Because we already know that your sitting president is a monster within himself. And the reason I say he's a monster within himself, because he knows what he's done. He knows who he's commanded to do and rule over certain things that have happened to people. He has to live with that within inside of himself each and every day. And a lot of the dictatorship that he has now, and the reason that he's still on the platform he's on, is because he knows that to be taken out any other way than through being overthrown or whatever has to happen, he would have to stand trial for those crimes. And he would have to give account for what is taking place and what's being done. Now, we know from some of the colonels and generals and some of the people that we've had on our platform, we understand and we know because these people are coming forward. And I commend these people for coming forward to share from their hearts what this government has done, what this government has caused them to do, and all of the things that were covered up. And although it may be hard for some of us to hear, but in part of uniting ourselves, we have to give everybody a chance to say what it is they need to say so that we can continue to move forward and continue to have the conversations. And no news is bad news right now. Everything is there to liberate the country, whether you're inside of Uganda or outside of Uganda, and move it forward. The same thing happened with Dr. King. Same thing happened with Gandhi. The same thing happened with Nelson Mandela. Yes, there were horrific and horrible things that happened, but everything that happened was history, and it was time for us to move forward. And we couldn't continue to stay in the past. Otherwise, we would be so bitter, so hurt, so overwhelmed by all the things that happened that we would never be able to rectify it, to move forward for the next generation. Because each generation needs to become better than the generation before it. The sitting president may be doing some things now that are horrific, and people cannot believe some of the things that he's done, being in the bush, and even now openly to the Ugandan people right in the streets of Uganda. But he is doing them, and they are real. And this new generation is seeing that for themselves. Trying to convince them of what happened and the anger and why we need to move forward. I think they're already seeing that for themselves. It's not playing out the way it did, 20 years ago, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago. But they're starting to see, because nothing that horrible can be hidden for long. If that is the personality of a man, he can hide it for a little while, but he won't be able to hide it forever. And I think a lot of what the youth is seeing there in Uganda now is a lot of what the youth saw in the United States of America when they felt the need to fight for justice, rights, and liberties to move forward. And we can honestly say that that same thing is happening right now in Uganda. Anna Adek, some of you have probably been able to be a part of some of my shows with her, the new president guild-elect there at Makerere University there in Uganda. There's a lot to be said about that young lady, because she is in harm's way each and every day. The rest of us are on the outside of Uganda, and she is inside Uganda each and every day fighting for the rights of the students that has started to spill over into other things because people care about her so much and they see that she has a heart that cares about the people, that even the hospitals are inviting her in to see what's going on there. And, you know, in other areas, she's being invited in to see what's going on, and people are talking to her about their issues because she's standing up against a government that she knows that what's going on. And she understands and knows that you can no longer continue to support a government that treats its people this way. And she's asking us, the Ugandans who are outside of the country, to stand behind them and stand with them firm to say, we know what's going on and we're not going to take it anymore. So I say all of this to say, like I talked about Dr. King and how we're talking about Charlie's program that was just a little before mine, is that the pain is there. The pain is real, and it all happened. Regardless of who pulled the trigger, who had the knives, who did the slaughtering, it has been done, and it is a horrific, horrific thing. But now it's time to unite and move forward. Otherwise, we will live there, and we will fester in that, and we will never be the platform that Voice of Uganda Radio wanted so much to be, which is to unite everyone now and to start to move forward. It's one of the main reasons that when Voice of Uganda Radio approached me about the platform and about what they were trying to do, it's one of the reasons that I felt the need to get on board. Because, can I be honest, I love the Ugandan community. I love the Ugandan people. I love the country of Uganda. I've been there. I love the food. I love the people. I love the countryside. I love the technology of how people figure out ways to make things easier for themselves in a government that doesn't. I love the country. Let's not mistake that. But I don't want my platform here to be a part of entertainment for Ugandans, because I'm not here just for the entertainment of the listening audience. That's not my purpose, and it's not my reason for being here. My whole purpose and reason for being here is because it's a platform for change. It's a platform for moving forward. It's a platform for laying our differences aside and starting somewhere to trust each other, to build each other up, and to move forward, to work together hand in hand, despite our differences. Somewhere we all have to lay our weapons down, and we have to start trusting each other. And trust doesn't come that easily, but it's what we have to start to do. It's what we had to do here in the United States of America. It's what they've done. They did in India, they did in South Africa, and it's what the Ugandan people are going to have to start to do too, because the people that are inside Uganda that are on the front line are fighting for their lives right now. They're fighting for their lives. And I feel like we owe it to them as those that are outside of the country to come to their cries. We hear their cries, and we know they're crying, and we need to come to their cries. One of the things we said about the memorial video that we put out there, and Padu, by the way, is going to be putting some more videos out there later. Now that we've got our YouTube account set up, it's easier for us to go out there and put things out there. Because let me say before I say anything, I appreciate each and every one of you for having the patience with us while we build up our websites and while we do the things that we need to do to get the things in place that we need to have in place. The reason that video was set up out there is because we need that video to go viral. Can I say to you, my Ugandan family, we're not asking a lot here. We really are not. It is not that difficult to link it to your web page, to your Facebook page, and allow other people to view it, or to send emails out and tell people to go and to view the video. Because we know that the more hits it gets, the more media attention it gets. And this is what needs to happen right now. We have to bring attention to the Ugandan people. We have to bring attention to the Ugandan people. It's what Dr. King did when they decided to have the Civil Rights March, the biggest civil rights movement ever in the United States of America in 1963. It had to happen, and it had to happen in such a massive and a big way in order to get the world on board, to let them know that we were united, we were standing together, and we had our causes and the things that we were fighting for. And it's what needs to happen with the video. Now, the video, I went out there this morning, and it had about 800 hits, but we know that there are more than 800 of us out there. Some of you, I know, went out on Fadu and viewed it there. But what we're asking you to do now is you also need to go out to YouTube, and you need to view, even if you don't want to view it, just let it play so that it gets the numbers that it needs to go viral. A lot of Ugandans are asking, how do we start? What do we do? And we're trying to lead you in that direction, but we need your help. We can't do it all by ourselves. If I could sit here on my computer and click that thing a million times, I would do that. But I can't do that. That's not the way fairness works. Fairness works that everybody goes out and participates and gets it out there and gets it rolling. Another thing, too, is we were talking about FADU, to a lot of you about going out there and signing up for FADU, the Federalist Alliance for Democracy and Development in Uganda. A few weeks back when we told you to go out there and register to become a member of FADU, we were still building the website. And a lot of the website's still being built, but now the registration part, we went to our IT people and we've given them a list of priorities. And the first priority was to get that registration list out there. And the next priority is they have to get our information page out there, because we've got a lot of videos we want to put out there. We got a couple of letters we want to put out there, and we have some other information out there that we want to put on that website. So when you click into FADU, you can go to any of the newspapers like you can on Voice Uganda Radio. You can go to any information that we just found out about that we put out there for information for you to have. So we want you to be a part of that as well. Now, when we told you to go out there 2 weeks ago, that was still being worked on. But now I'm telling you it's out there and it's working. One of the things that happened when I decided to come on with Voice Uganda Radio with the affiliation of FADU is that I would sit on a board that we would monitor these things for safety reasons. We would make sure that we had everything in place, that we had protection. We pay hundreds of dollars a month for protection on those sites to keep everything secure, so there's nothing that anyone has to worry about. Let me explain to you. When the NAACP came about, and for those of you who are not aware of that, this is something that formed back in the 60s to protect the rights of blacks and African Americans back then. The NAACP is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And it had to become a platform because what we realized is standing alone by ourselves, our voices would never be heard. But if we built a platform where everyone could go and voice their complaints and voice their opinions under their groups or their leaders or their church or whatever, it could come in a massive forum so that it could be fought on a bigger scale, which is what made the civil rights movements so big and helped us get over a lot of hurdles back in the 1960s because of that. That is the reason FADU was set up. Now, I want to tell you this. Back in the 1960s, when the NAAPC was set up, there was a need for protection. All those people who registered to become a part of the NAACP, their names and all their information was private and protected. And the reason it had to be that way is because we were still dealing with the Ku Klux Klan back then. And we knew that we could put people in harm's way. We knew that people still had fear, a lot of fear, because back then African Americans were being killed and slaughtered and missing, and they find them in woods where they set them on fire, hung them from a tree and set their bodies on fire and left the bodies hanging there. I mean, there was a lot of things that were happening. So the NAACP knew the importance of keeping those names sacred. Well, now we don't anymore because the laws protect us. And there's no reason for anyone to be afraid anymore. African Americans have moved past the stage of being fearful. And now if you go out there and you want to know if somebody's a member, it'll come up because there's no reason. We don't hide any of those things anymore. Well, we understand that with FADU. FADU is in a sensitive stage right now because we do understand that Ugandans still have a fear about retribution from the government on their families at home, or finding out that they're a part of something here in the U.S. and doing something to their families back home. We understand and we know that, and we understand and we know the need to protect you right now. We understand that completely. The day will come when there will no longer need to be any protection, and your names can be as freely seen as anyone that goes out on the NAACP list. And if you want to know, it's still not easy to get those names out of there, but it's information that's public information if you want it. Uganda will move to that place also. It is not there yet, and we do understand. Because the reason I bring this up is because I sit on that board. And I am surprised at how little of people that are out there. Please, you have to get past the fear factor, and you've got to get out there and you've got to register and you have to become a part of the do. The same reason that African Americans had to become a part of the NAACP, it stood behind Dr. Martin Luther King and made him the strong, iconic leader that he was. FADU, this is what's going to happen with FADU, just in case some of you don't know, because you continue to ask the question, what are we doing and how are we moving forward? When I share this information with you, please feel the need to share this information with whoever you need to, because you need to become an advocate for FADU, and you need to put it out there as to why people need to become a part of it. Am I saying that FADU is the only thing out there or the best thing out there? No, I'm not. But I'm going to explain to you in a little while all the other six, because it's called the Big Six, that was a part of the Civil Rights Movement in 1963 that marched on Washington, D.C. It wasn't just NAACP. It was 5 other entities that marched with them. So let's get that straight also. We're not saying that it's the only thing out there, but we're saying that it's a big platform that we're trying to build up out there. Now, when issues come up in Uganda, such as people getting killed, if the government right now decided to go in there and do a massive killing, or like it's done right now where it's taking the teachers out of the school and some of the pupils and teaching them gun training. What FADU does for us is whenever you want something to be seen on the floor, on the House, on the House Senate floor here in America, you can put forth a petition for your voice to be heard. When you put forth that petition on the floor, if it passes on the floor, they will determine where it needs to go. Which for us, it would be for the African Alliance here in America, and those that work on that task force. But you've got to have so many signatures before the floor will say, okay, this can move forward. The reason we need those signatures and the reason we need you to become a member of FADU is because when we get ready to say this is what's happening in Uganda and America needs to stop supporting this, and we want to have our voices heard, and we want the media to pick up on it, and we want the newspapers to pick up on it, they will pick up on it because FADU will stand as a symbol of thousands and thousands and thousands of Ugandans that stand behind it. And those things will get our petitions on the Senate floor. And from the Senate floor, those things will move on to where they need to go to get our voices heard. If we say we have to start the fight, and the fight has to start on the outside of the country, then this is some of the things that we're saying that has to be done. My fellow Ugandans, we're not asking for money here. We're asking you to simply become a part of an organization that is trying to move us forward. I understand your fears. We had those fears back in the 60s. My grandmother was a part of that generation, and I know the fear that they lived in. And, we have to understand and we have to know that there are certain platforms out there that we can get our voices heard. But if we continue to be paralyzed in fear, it's not going to work. Now, Ugandans that are outside of the country, we've also I want you to know that we've also talked to Anna Adek there in Uganda. And we also going to have students that are there in Uganda that have become a part of FADU to make these numbers grow and to make these numbers into what we need these numbers to become. Because we can get on this radio station every weekend and we can battle back and forth on the phones and we can talk about the problems and talk about everything that is harmful and what's going on. But what are we talking about as far as these type of things that need to move us forward? That's my platform. And this is where I'm coming in to say that I'm looking at these numbers and we are falling way, way too short. And you can't continue to call Voice of Uganda Radio and say, what are we going to do? How are we going to move forward? This is not going to work. With all the excuses, we've got to stop with the excuses and we've got to start to get on board. And we've got to say that if this is a platform that if this is where we start, then this is where we start. The NAACP is the biggest organization ever here now in the United States of America, and it still speaks out for the rights of African Americans. It still speaks out for the rights. Let me just tell you, because in 1963, the biggest march on Washington, D.C. had 250,000 people there. It was huge. And they called it the Big Six. For those of you, my American audience was probably aware of that, but for those of you who don't know the history here in the United States, the reason it was called the Big Six was because it was not just the NAACP. Let me explain to you who the Big Six was, and then I'm going to explain to you why they lobbied under civil rights, because a lot of what we were fighting for is a lot of what the Ugandan people are fighting for right now. The CORE was a part of it. The Congress of Racial Equality, and some of you may know of that, the Congress of Racial Equality, and their abbreviation was CORE. The SCLC was a part of that, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC. The SNCC was a part of that Big Six. The Students for Nonviolence and Coordinating Committee, that was the Students of Nonviolence and Coordinating Committees, the SNCC. The Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters. This was something that we traveled by train a lot back in the earlier days. And African Americans, when they were able to get those jobs as porters on the sleep, and they were the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And then the last one that rounded out that Big Six was the National Urban League. Now, those were the 6 people that were fighting for their voices to be heard. So when I say FADU, it may be that there are others that may join with us. And if they have members, all of those names and all of those signatures are all a part of a petition that gets our voices heard on the floor in the Senate when that time comes and we need to do that. This is interesting, too, because let me just share with you just a couple of the things that, that they were fighting for, all the different groups. They were fighting for the elimination of racial segregation in public schools, which was a big thing back then. They were fighting for the protection for demonstration against police brutality. Police brutality was very, very, very bad in the late 1950s to the early 1960s. It was really very, very bad. So one of the groups was for the protection for demonstrations against police brutality. The other issues they were fighting for was a major public works programs to provide jobs, because public works was it's kind of like some of the things that are going on in Uganda, where people are bidding for contracts and all of the corruption that goes along with that. Well, that was happening in the United States as well. So the public work program were also out there because they needed jobs to be provided to African Americans. The passage of a law prohibiting racial discrimination in public and private hiring. That has come a long way, and even now in today's society within the United States of America, we are still a long, long ways ahead of where we used to be, but it's still something that everybody has to keep their eye on. The passage of a law prohibiting racial discrimination in public and private hiring. They were also marching for a $2 increase for wages, because the wages for African Americans, or blacks as we were called then, was so low that they were marching for a $2 raise for African Americans, which still, by the way, would not have put us in the same category as our white counterparts. So $2 was not going to make us equal. It just was going to get us in a standard of living that we could live in, which is what the teachers are striking against right now there in Uganda. And then they were also fighting for self-government for the District of Columbia, because what happened back then was the District of Columbia was predominantly black. And we felt like they should have their own mayor, they should have their own governor, they should have their own platform that came forward in Washington, D.C. or wherever to fight for the rights of what they needed where they were at as well. Because as you can imagine, if you're talking about an all-black community, you're talking about a group of people who were just dismissed off the face of the earth as not being important, which is pretty much what the sitting president in Uganda is doing right now to his people. So, the segregation, we won't say that there's segregation that needs to happen in Uganda, but we know that the school systems are in a lot of trouble right now. We know that they're in a lot of troubles, and that's why the teachers are on strike right now. So we know that that's a problem, which was one of the things we were fighting for in 1963. The demonstration against police brutality, can you imagine that was something we were fighting for in the 1960s? And here in today's society, it's what the Ugandan people are fighting for right now inside the walls of Uganda. And can I say that public management bill just made this worse for them rather than better? Because the brutality now in which they can fall under is even worse than it was before this bill was passed. Because there's no accountability for what the police force can do to these people. And where there's no accountability, we know that people will suffer, and we know that people will be hurt, and we know that people will die. And we know that innocent people will die, and that's the sad part about that. The discrimination in public and private hiring. That is something that the Ugandan people are fighting for also. It is amazing how much of what we were fighting for during those times in the biggest civil rights movement in America is some of the same thing that the Ugandan people are seeing today. I talked with Anna Deck. I said, what are you telling the students, the first year students that are coming into the university about jobs? I said, because you know and I know that when they graduate from the university, the chances of them getting a job is pretty much zero. And she says, we're telling them that. And they know that. But they know that they want their education. They know that knowledge is power. They know that this government is not always going to be the way that it is. And when this government moves forward, they want to be moved forward as well. Can I tell you, my heart just skipped beats when I hear her talking about things like that, because the drive and the zeal to continue their lives under some of the worst conditions there in Uganda, these young people are still fighting for their rights and their liberties. And they don't care that they're not going to get a job when they get out. The important thing is that they educate themselves, because education is powerful. We all know that, all of us that are living on the outsides of the country, we all know how important education is, because we understand from where we live in our collective countries, we understand the way the system works. And when you are educated in the system works very, very well. The $2 minimum wage is, can I say we were fighting for something that hadn't been promised to us. Now, the teachers in Uganda that are fighting for the increases, and the professors and the lecturers that are leaving Uganda and going for better jobs, these people are fighting for something that the government said they allocated money for, and that the monies and the funds were out there for these things. Yet we understand and we know that the monies are like, now that they need the monies have disappeared and they're no longer out there. And you have a government that is telling you, you will work with what we pay you, or we will dismiss you and hire younger people. Well, I don't think that that's what any of us want to happen, because when you get on a platform where you hire younger people, are you really getting people with the skills? And one of the things Anna was talking about on my show last week was that you get teachers that are not properly trained, do not speak proper English, and don't know the lecturers or the books the way they need to in order to teach the youth. Or even on a university level, they're not at the level that they need to be. But the interesting thing is the president does not care about their level. He only cares that, number one, that he can continue to pay the salary that he's paying. And number two, that he can show, again, that he is in control of the country and no one's going to tell him what to do. I ask you, my fellow Ugandans, who's holding this man responsible for the way that he's ruling the country, if not for those of us who are outside of the country that are asked to be a part of a movement to bring about change for these things to happen? Because when the Americans were fighting for a $2 increase, it was not even going to put us on the same pay scale as our white counterparts. It was simply going to put us at a scale where we could function in society. That is all that the teachers are asking there in Uganda now is just for the right to be able to provide for themselves and their families. Some of the things that Anna was sharing was the same professors and the same lecturers that were teaching them in the universities could not even afford to send their own children to their universities. Some of the same teachers who are asking for the increase in pay for themselves, they can't even afford to send their children to the schools. So, it's very, very interesting that history, even though it's on another continent, it's still repeating itself. And these are the things that are not fair, not equal to the people there, and they should not have to live under dictatorship the way that they're doing. It's interesting. I was telling you with the conductors there, the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, the way that they were treated was just absolutely horrible. And if they complained to anyone about their treatments, their pay could be held, or there could be an accident and they could be pushed off the train in the middle of the night. And when the train rolls in, they say, what happened to so-and-so? And it would be that, well, we don't know. Maybe he was upset about the pay, or maybe he was upset about the fight going on or the struggle, and he left. When they know that that wasn't true, he probably was pushed from a train, or when the train pulled into the next station, people who were troublemakers, there was a group of men hanging out there. We won't say they were the Ku Klux Klan, but we know that they were. Those names would be given to them. It was a way of keeping people in line and straightening them up. People wouldn't complain. People wouldn't say anything. The porters would definitely not say anything, because if their name got on that list and the Klansmen knew it, it was reason for them to harass or kill their families, or harass and kill them, or have them pushed off of a train. So the brutalities are there, and what is happening to the Ugandan people, it's there, and I understand it. I understand it to a degree that you wouldn't believe, because we ourselves had to fight for those same equalities. But the fight remains, and we have to stand up, and we have to stand up for the Ugandan people that are still inside the country. We're going to go ahead and take a break here. I've come to my first hour of the show. My phone lines are going to be open when we come back. I do encourage you to call in and be a part of the conversation, because a lot of what I'm talking about is not just for my benefit, but it's for the benefit of opening the conversation up for another sector here. So please stay tuned for Freedom at Hand. I am your host, Miss Brenda, and we are going to take a break here, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. You are listening to Voice of Uganda Radio, the mouthpiece of all Ugandans, wherever they may be, to voice their problems without fear of any retribution. The Voice of Uganda Radio works in sync with FADU, the Federalist Alliance of Democracy and Development in Uganda. FADU is an organization that was formed to work as a platform for all Ugandans at home and outside, to work synergistically to liberate our mother Uganda from the ruthless invaders that have sucked it dry. Therefore, FADU invites all able Ugandans to act now and save the Ugandan humanity that is being slaughtered, destroyed, and robbed by a few people unworthy to call themselves Ugandans. Many people are crying for action in Uganda as they languish in misery. FADU echoes their cries by making the loudest alarm to everyone to join FADU, not tomorrow or the next day, but today. The number to join is 408-904-7038. The email is info@fadu.org.
Fellow citizens, we call upon you to practice resistance and protest against Museveni. We call upon you to oppose strongly the Museveni government, which is responsible for the downfall of Uganda. It is important to know that Museveni is afraid of the millions of people who are living for that day, for the light of day when Uganda will be liberated from his dictatorial regime. Fellow citizens, it's been 24 years of dictatorship. We should all know that at present our drive for freedom has already grown so strong that Museveni Museveni has already begun to change his tactics. We call upon people to participate, to organize silent stand-ins for a free Uganda. We call upon people to demonstrate that we're tired of him. We call upon governments in the United States of America and abroad, people in responsible positions, politicians, only to act in the service of peace, justice, and freedom for Uganda. We call upon people to use all legal and imaginative means and methods in order to ensure peace, justice, and freedom for Uganda. We call upon people from the north and south, from the east and west, and yes, from the central province of Uganda to be loyal to one another. We must preserve.
Thank you. This is, for those of you who are just joining back in with us, this is Miss Brenda, and this is Freedom at Hand that you're listening to. Thank you so much for being a part of the program and so much for a part of what we have been discussing here, which has really been comparing a lot of what happened in late 1955 to 1963 with African Americans in the United States of America, and how a lot of that feeds into what's happening in Uganda right now, with Ugandans fighting for a lot of their rights and things that are happening to them there. You know, it's interesting because when I went off, I was talking about the wages that Americans were fighting for a $2 increase back then. Not that it would make us equal to those, the white Americans, but that it would give us a cost of living where we could take care of ourselves. And I was explaining that that was not something that was promised to us. That was something that we were asking for. And the Ugandan people are fighting for something that they were promised, that they, year after year after year, they have to continue to fight for something that has already been promised to them, and then for the government to beat up on them and to make them feel like they're, them not being at their post and them, going on strike is, retaliating against the government. They're not retaliating against the government. They're just asking the government to stand up to the promises that it made for them. Because we understand and we know that the president, his children are not educated in the system. So he doesn't care about the teachers. He doesn't care if the children have the best lecturers or the best teachers to move them forward. I explained last week on my show when I was talking with Anna was that he was saying one of the reasons that the teachers don't deserve the increases were because they're not keeping the children up to the same standard as some of the children in the private sector. But, when you have children that are sitting on the ground, they don't have adequate supplies. They don't have pencils. They don't have paper. They don't have chalkboards. They don't have markers. They don't have anything. And they're sitting there in the sun or outside in the elements for 5 and 6 or 7 hour school day with a teacher on a board trying to teach them whatever she can. When these children get up and they go home, number one, they're starving and they're hungry. They haven't had anything to eat all day. And we know that you have to have nutrition in your body and in your system, whether you're working on a 9-to-5 job or whether you're in college at a university or whether you're a student. But we know that children need these nutrients way more than anyone else. The other thing, too, is we know that when these children are dismissed from school and dismissed from class, how are they going to go home and do homework? They don't have books. They don't have any of the supplies that they need. They have nothing. All they have is to retain the information in their heads in order to be able to be a part of the conversation the next day in class. And we're asking them to retain this information in their head, and we haven't even fed them during the day in order for them to burn the fuel that they need to continue to be a part of the conversation. The sitting president knows this. So how are you going to hold the lecturers and the teachers and all of them responsible for these children when the conditions in which a lot of these children are having to learn and be a part of a classroom setting is not equal to their counterparts that are in private schools or schools that are a little better than the government schools or the local schools? So he hides behind everything, and nothing is ever his fault. And now he wants to hold the teachers responsible for the marks that these children are getting when these children do not have what they need. Just like he doesn't care about the children having proper classrooms to learn in. I mean, his children are not learning there. His children are not going to college in Uganda. Their children, and even a lot of the MPs, their children are being sent abroad to study, and their children are going to some of the elite private schools because they have the monies and they can afford these things. But to say that you don't care for the other children in Uganda would be, it's wrong. When you become the president of a country, you become the president because of the love of the country, not love of self. And somewhere he's become so in love with himself that he no longer loves anyone else, nor does he care about anyone else. Because contracts, you heard from some of the previous programs, contracts are given to his family members and are given to his children. And those contracts, they are able to have a good life and a good living, and they're able to make money. So anything that furthers his family ahead is okay. But he doesn't want anyone else to be put in that same category. Even if he just fed the children in the schools, even if he just kept and maintenance the hospitals, it still would not elevate the people higher to a higher level than his family. They would have a long, long, long way to go before they could ever be put on that platform. I mean, the hospitals there are just are terrible. It's just, I mean, when you have no running water in the hospitals, and people are taking water out of a swamp or out of a little river area and then bringing that water to the hospital and boiling that water in order for new babies that are being born in the hospital, or cleaning up wounds or whatever it needs to be done. And we've learned that the only reason there's no running water in the hospital is because there's a $3 million shilling bill that's still due that needs to be paid. And this is a government hospital. But we understand and we know that this president his family's not being seen at that hospital. And he's been known to make comments out in the open. He's not even hiding the way he feels about the country, that he would never be seen. He'd never step foot in any of these hospitals to be seen or to be treated. But he thinks that it's okay for the Ugandan people to be seen and to be treated this way. This dictatorship has gone on too long. It's gone on way, way too long. And for people not to want to get in with FADU or get on board with some of the other programs to support these things, I mean, we've got to start supporting these things so that we can continue to move forward and fight with what we have. It's as if we've given everybody weapons, but no one has bullets. You've got to load up your guns here and become a part of this fight and become a part of this movement for change. Because if you don't, we can no longer continue to complain about the conditions and the way that people are living there in Uganda. And it's not just people. These are your families. These are your loved ones. These are your parents. These are your grandparents. These are your siblings, your nieces and your nephews. And we're telling the government that it's okay to treat these people this way when we know that it isn't. And Ugandans outside of the country, we've already talked about this. They're working 2 and 2.5 jobs to fund money into their families to be able to get medical treatment. If you knew that you were spending money in Uganda to send your family member to a hospital that was not equipped with what it needed to help your family member, would you send your money to Uganda for your family member to be treated in such an environment and to be treated in such a way? So what the government is telling you is that it no longer respects your family members that are inside of Uganda, but it no longer respects you as well. It respects your money, because we've already talked about that all the money that you send in through MoneyGram, that the government gets a percentage of that money. And the percentage of that money that they're getting is a lot of money, because we estimated that Ugandans outside of Uganda are sending millions of dollars. I mean, I think it was $565 million last year went into Uganda through MoneyGram. So look at your $100 you're sending or your $200 that you're sending and put it with everyone who's listening to my voice around the globe. And that's how much money, $565 million was sent into Uganda to your loved ones. And the same man that you no longer want in power is getting a percentage of that. He's getting a percentage of that money. And the percentage of that money that he's getting, he's using that money to buy weapons and to buy tear gas or whatever he needs to bring harm to your loved ones. Would you send this money in there, and would you do this on this type of a platform if you knew that he was taking a percentage of your money and causing harm to those that you love in the country? But yet that's what we're doing. We're funding a private war. And the private war is against ourselves. And that private war, we may not be in Uganda, we may not be on the front line of getting this abuse, but the abuse is there. And yes, our dollars are going to fund this to a certain degree. So, we've got to be very, very careful with this. We've got to be very, very careful with this. And we need to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in harm's ways. We've got to make sure of this. So I asked, what are we doing to rise up against what is happening, and what are we doing to rise up against these things? I was reading in the news this morning the Bo Xinlei there in China, who just has been given life in prison. He was outed there politically for his corruption and his abuse of power. And do we have that same power in Uganda? I say that we do. Do we have that same power as those of us who are outside? I say we have that same power to make our leaders accountable for what they're doing. Corruption and abuse of power, and he's getting life in prison, and they're taking all of his assets, everything. And there's even reason they believe that his wife was a part of poisoning a businessman there, from Britain. I mean, there's a British businessman poisoning and killing him. We've got to stand together, and we've got to say, if the system is not working, what do we do to make the system work? This is why we were talking so much about FADU and becoming a member of that. It gives us a platform. It gives us a platform to stand on, not only here in the United States, but everywhere. Because right now, your president is somewhere here in the U.S. He's here with the UN. And I know that he is going to use what has just happened in Kenya to say we need more military funding to fight what is going on. And we know that the funding that he's talking about is going to be for his corruption, for him to keep fighting the Ugandan people. Because, no one wants to be a part of funding a war. No one wants to be, unless it's all for right reasons. And he's going to ride on the sleeves of the horrific thing that just happened to the Kenyan people to say, look, this is why we need more money. This is why we need to continue to fight. When we already know that the corruption that's going on with him and the war that he has is not to fight to protect the Ugandan people. The war that he has is to harm the Ugandan people. And what does that say? I mean, who wants to be a part of funding a government that brings harm to its people? We want to be a part of funding a government that is helping its people and that is moving its people forward. Because I guarantee you the military force that your sitting president needs to continue to fight, it's not going to be with people who are willing to go and fight for him. The Islamic extremists that, they keep getting funding to fight in this war. When you start pulling teachers out of a classroom and you tell these teachers that this, patriotism, you throw this patriotism thing around, and you throw it around in the media, and you're saying that this is why these teachers want to do this, because they want to help to defend the country. And the Constitution supports that, to say that any able-bodied person should come and fight. Well, what about all the young men that are around in Uganda that have no jobs, and that a lot of them are college educated and they have no jobs? Why are you not going to those men? Why are you pulling teachers out? So when you talk about patriotism and when you talk about the Constitution saying every able-bodied person, why are you not taking those people? I tell you why you're not taking them, because no one wants to be a part of that war. Because it is not a war for the good of the Ugandan people. It's a war against the Ugandan people. When you start training people to kill each other, you take them back in history. Now we're back to what Charlie was talking about on his program that came on before mine. And the history of that is so horrific that most all Ugandans know that that is not the direction that we want the country to go in anymore. That is not the direction of the Ugandan people. It may be the direction of the sitting president, but it is not the direction of the Ugandan people. And people are standing up and saying, we do not want to do this. Even with families now that there's children running from the NRA, they don't even sleep in their villages at night anymore because of all the young children that were being captured into captivity and taken out and trained. We know this from the Lost Boys, and we know that this still happens. And now these young children are sleeping out away from their homes and away from their villages so they won't be captured in the middle of the night and forced into a war that they do not want to fight. So now you're telling me that the teachers want to fight? And can I honestly say, from the pictures that I saw that were in the media of these teachers there trying to figure out how to use these guns, they looked about as comfortable as a Ugandan holding a snake. You give a Ugandan, you give me any Ugandan and say, here, hold this snake, and then I'm going to take a picture and tell people that Ugandans are no longer afraid of snakes. Well, if I look at that picture, I'm going to be able to tell that Ugandan's pretty afraid of that snake. And you may think that it's okay, but he doesn't feel comfortable with it. It's the same thing I saw when I looked at those teachers holding guns. They were not comfortable with what they were doing. And no matter what the government says and how many pictures they take, these women are not comfortable with those firearms. And why are you taking women when you have so many young men? It's because everyone is running from the government, because it is not their war. It is the war of the president. And it's the war to war against each other. And the one thing that Ugandans can stand united in right now and say that we do not want, nor do we care to fight against each other. It's not what we are about, and it's not who we are. And this government is using everything possible to say, oh, it's okay, they're comfortable with it, it's their patriotism, and they're okay with it, and they're going to be fine. In our time, when President Lincoln was president and we started the Civil War fighting for freedom for slaves, well, back then, slaves were told, if you come and you fight in the war, when the war is over, you will be given your freedom. So, of course, they put on the uniforms and they put on the guns and they went to fight in the war, because you stood the chance not only you may be free someday, but you would free other people. Even if you died in the war, you were fighting for a cause that you believed in. So you willingly went and you were a part of this fight. And you were going to be given your freedom when this war was over. The Ugandan people are not being promised anything. More than anything, they're being threatened. Because the teachers who are going through this training are now told that they have to pledge allegiance to the NRA and become a part of that, which they have no cause to do that. And they're also being told that if you don't do this, then you won't get paid and you could possibly lose your jobs. So I tell you, does that sound like a people that is willing to go and fight in a war because they know what this war and they know what this fighting is all about? But yet we say that it's, he's wanting all of us to believe that this is what they want to do. Even it's very sad, a video that I was able to watch a couple of weeks ago on these young boys that were talking about when they were captured and how they had to escape. And basically, they took your shoes. You did, if you had shoes, but they took your shoes and they took everything. And if you tried to run, you had to run through the bush with nothing. So you were being scarred up and you were being cut up and you were being bruised, which slowed you down tremendously. And either you lay there and waited for them to capture you, or you had the strength to continue forward and to continue to run. And these are boys who were told that they were signing up they were given papers to sign, and they were told that this was for free education. And yet when the trucks came and loaded them up and took them off, there was no free education. They found out that they were being taken to fight in the war later on, only to find out that they signed papers that said that they were going to, be a part of the war.
Fellow citizens, we call upon you to practice resistance and protest against Museveni. We call upon you to oppose strongly the Museveni government, which is responsible for the downfall of Uganda.
That sometimes I lose connection with Voice Uganda Radio, but they're pretty good about getting me right back on board, so I apologize for that. But if President Obama was a part of everything that happened in the United States, he wouldn't have time to be the president, because he would be too busy trying to run everything other than the country. And after a while, Americans would wonder, why does he have to be a part of everything that's happening in the United States? What is it that he doesn't want anybody to know, that everything has to come through him? It would really be the question that we would start to ask after a while, because we would really want to know. Well, the same thing is happening now with what's going on there with the president there in Uganda. Most of my American audience, if you ask, when they ask the question, it's like it doesn't make sense that a president would need to know and have to be in charge of everything that happens in the country, which shows us that it's true dictatorship, that the people in Uganda don't have the rights that their country and their government says that they have. Otherwise, why does all of these things need to happen? And we know that the president has his hands in absolutely everything. And we know that no one in the country can make a move without something going through the president. Not only does he have control of the people in Uganda, a part of me feels like he still has control of people outside of Uganda. But the bigger part is he has control of the whole government. The whole government answers to him. For people's monies and paychecks to be held up, and people to be promised things and not given things, and having to come to him and beg him on their knees to pay them so that they can continue to move forward with their livelihoods, because they went against him or they spoke out against him or whatever, just to teach them a lesson that you do not speak out against me. It's a sad day when you have a whole country that bows down to one man. And we promised that this would not happen when Hitler did what he did to the Jewish community in secrecy and in silence. It's not a way to run the country, and it's not a way to ask people to live and to live out their lives. And let me tell you, Ugandans, especially those of you that are in the United States of America, most of us, our senators in our states that we live in, would have to listen to you if you voiced your opinion about how you felt about what was going on in Uganda. Because if the Hispanic community and if the African American community really knew a lot of what was happening in Uganda, we would have to tell these people, and you're voting a lot of these things in, and you're giving them more money, and you're funding things that, stand against the principles of what we stand against here in the United States of America. We would have to make people accountable. Does that mean that our government's not going to help people or do things that it needs to do? No, it isn't. But it does mean that we make people more accountable for what happens. Because one thing your president feels right now, his arrogance is he wears his arrogance so high up on his shoulders that he doesn't even feel like the United States of America can hold him back from what he wants to do. He feels that he can do anything that he wants to do. His power within his head has gotten that large. And the Ugandan people standing united are far, far stronger than you think you are against this government. Because I can tell you, especially from the conversations that I've had with Anna, this government is nervous. They're irritable and they're nervous. And they're nervous because they understand now that the people know, and the people are no longer sitting still, and the people are starting to make themselves heard. Like one of the things that Anna says that they do there on Mondays is they have Black Monday, and all the students wear black, and they're trying to encourage all of Uganda to wear black. And we need to encourage our family members or anybody that we know. It's a silent way of moving the country forward. It doesn't mean that they're going to break the public management law that's just passed. All they do is they wear their black in support to know that we know that there is corruption and we're not going to stand for it anymore. They need to back the students. There's only so many students on those campuses. And Anna's even getting some of the other colleges on board as well to say Black Monday. Make the statement to walk out of the house in black. What can the government do to you, and what can they honestly say to you? You're not communing together. You're not talking about politics. You're not doing anything. You're just standing together in silence to say, we understand and we know that there is corruption, and what are you doing with our monies, and what are you doing with our fundings? Because one of the things that the university knows there at McCary University is that the school is getting money, and the school is getting funds. And when the budget is set up, monies are set aside for them. But when they go there to get those monies or to ask for that funding for whatever they need, the monies are never there. So where is the money? Where is the accountability? One of the things we told you here at Voice of Uganda Radio is we wanted people to give money. Support the radio station. Give money. Not only does it pay for a lot of the protection we have with all of the things that we're setting up, not only does it pay for all the phone lines, the free phone lines that we're giving out now for people to call in, because it's important for us to give out those free phone lines. Not only is it supporting, all of us staying on air and doing what we're doing, everybody that works here on a volunteer basis. And we, a selected group of people, are putting our money in to make this work. We're not, we're funding this thing and we're keeping this thing afloat. But how long do you think that we can keep all this stuff afloat on our own without some help or some participation from the Ugandan family? Even if everybody listening to my voice right now got off the phone and donated $5, we could stand behind the teachers and allow them to have their strike. Because what's going on right now is they are going to fold under the pressure, because how long can they go without food and monies to pay for their living expenses? One of the things with Dr. Martin Luther King, when we were going through civil rights and we were fighting for Rosa Parks when she refused to give up her seat on the bus, one of the things we did to rally behind her is everybody said for 2 months we will not ride the bus. For 2 months we will walk to work. And we didn't work a mile away. We worked 5 and 10 miles away. Our family members, I wasn't a part of this, but our family members walked 5 and 10 miles one way to get to where they worked. And when they got off from work, they had to walk 5 or 10 miles back. And they did this for 2 months. They did it. It crippled the bus system there in Montgomery, that they had to stop running some of the buses because the funds were so low, because they made that much money from the black community riding the bus, that when they no longer rode those buses for 2 months, it made such an impact that they had to stop some of the routes. And did they know that they were that powerful? The blacks didn't know that they were that powerful. They had no idea that they were that powerful. But they knew that they had to stand behind a person who was treated with unjust. And they were willing to stand behind that person and do that. And that's what made us strong. And that's what made civil rights so successful and helped us to move forward as African Americans. So I say to you, my fellow Ugandans, what is $5 to you? And trust me, you go online and you shop all the time. You buy books from Amazon, you order things that you want online, you shop and buy clothes online. Our system is the same way. We had to go through the same entities. We had to get the same safeguards. We had to get the same protection. All of that stuff is being paid for out there for protection. So please don't think that we will put you in harm's way, because one of the things that we understand here at Voice of Uganda Radio is the fear that most people have. We understand the fear that's still there and it's still real. But we got to unite. We have got to start fighting this. Blacks, African Americans, call us what you will, back in the 60s. I think we were considered colored people still. Do you think that we were not afraid? Of course we were afraid. And most of the monies that were collected for the NAACP back then was collected through the churches, because African Americans, we found our stronghold in the churches. So when we went to church, the churches would take up a special collection every Sunday for the NAACP. And those monies, they would write a check and they would send those monies in for the NAACP. And that's how the funding was put there for lawyers, for legal representation, for people who lost their job to help them pay their rent or help them pay their mortgage or keep people's lights from being turned off because their husband was arrested or the husband was killed by the Klansmen and we needed to keep the family afloat for a month. Why are we not standing behind these teachers and supporting them? We have no excuse. We have no excuse. I just told you that over 535 million shillings was sent, $1 million, American US dollars, was sent to Uganda last year. And all we're asking for here at Voice Uganda Radio is $5 to fund the cause. Because what we would do is we would sponsor teachers. We would sponsor 5 or 6 or 10 teachers, give them $20, 20 US dollars, so that they can continue to stand out and stand against this government. Anna Adek, the students that are fighting there at Macquarie University with Black Monday, they need help. They need funding. And they don't need a lot of money. We're not, my fellow Ugandans, we're not talking about huge amounts of monies from one person. We're talking about small amounts of monies from many of people to pool together to make these things work. Is there going to be accountability? I have been asked to sit on these boards. I have been asked to oversee these projects and to oversee these things to make sure that these things run with accountability. I love the Ugandan people. Otherwise, I would not be on this platform. The other Americans who stand with us, we love the community. A lot of them have no idea how the Ugandan people are suffering. A lot of them have no idea what's going on. They do know that something's going on, but they don't know what's going on. And everybody wants to stand and be a part of this. But it's not just our fight. It's the fight of the Ugandan people. And we're trying to get everybody on board that we possibly can to say, become a part of this movement to help us move forward. The fights that are already happening on the ground, and we know of many of them that we can't even talk about on the radio because we understand fear. And we cannot talk about things that we don't want to put people's names out there or put people in harm's way. But please understand me when I say, if we don't get behind this push and start supporting it, we're like a battleship in the water without any ammunition. We will be shot down and we will sink. And we will sink before we ever had a chance to show how powerful we could be. So all we're asking from the Ugandan community that's outside is to $5. Just go out there after the program and just click and send it. Because I promise you, there are things that are happening that we can't share everything that is happening. We can't share everything that is happening because our listening audience is vast. And we know that we have ears out there, just like Anna was saying there in the university there in Macquarie. There are spies in the university. There are spies in the university that go back and report on everything that's being said and everything that's being done. Why would you not think that those same spies are not a part of listening, are part of our listening audience? They are. And they know. And they're listening. And they know that this push and this drive is bigger than anything that has ever come up against this president. And this president knows it. And he will shoot us out of the water wherever he can. And he will make his army as big as he needs to make his army with our same people, our same loved ones. Like I said on my shows every week, your loved ones may not be in harm's way today, but it does not mean that they're not in harm's way. Why do you care whether the money funds someone from the north, south, east, or west? If we are saying we are starting to stand united, if we start to say that we are a part of the movement to move us forward, me as an American, I don't see any Ugandans as anything other than Ugandans. In the United States of America right now, I see all of us as Americans. The only time I consider myself an African American is when I have to fill out a application for something, or when I have to apply for something, or when I have to note it on paperwork or something that I'm doing. I see myself as equal to everyone who lives in the United States of America. If you ask that of people in Canada, the UK, Switzerland, Sweden, Afghanistan, Israel, anywhere, people are starting to understand and know that they are part of a collective community. And that's the way people want to be recognized in their community. Is there a lot of unfairness that's still going on in the world? Well, yes, there is. There are people who are being treated in ways that is just, it's saddening and it's very sickening. The gassing that's just happened there. My heart skips a beat for those people, because they are equal and have rights as everyone else in the country. But when a government decides that these people no longer have rights for whatever reasons, and you decide to gas them and expect the rest of the world to sit back and say, oh, wow, well, wonder why they did that. I wonder what these people did. These people did nothing. All the wars all around the world, are these people doing something to cause these wars and to cause these afflictions against them? No, they're not. Did the Ugandan people cause all of these wars and afflictions and things that happened to them? No, they did not. These are innocent people that lost their lives at the hand of a few. All around the globe, innocent people are losing their lives to a few group of people that thinks it's okay for them to treat a society of people the way that they do. When I look at the Ugandan people, I see the Ugandan people as a whole. When I look at my American culture where I live, I see us as a whole. I don't separate us out anymore. Even though our media tries to separate us out, even though when things happen, they try to separate us out, the killings, the guns, everything that happens, there's always something to try to divide us. But the one thing we always remember in the United States of America is what those things divided us many, many years ago and caused pain across the globe, across the United States of America. And we will not allow those things to happen again. We cannot allow those things. History cannot continue to repeat itself. And we remind ourselves each and every day when these things come up in the media, how far we've come to get where we are, and how that is the movement that we want to continue forward. It's the same movement, and it's the same thing that we want to do there in Uganda. We have to be reminded of all the atrocities, of all the heartache, of all the pain that this government has caused on its people, and remember that these are the reasons why we have to move the people forward, and we have to stand behind them. And my fellow Ugandans that are outside of the country, if we do not stand behind these people, who will stand behind them? Because I'm telling you, I sit on these boards, and we don't get, other than the people that are funding to keep us afloat, we don't get any support or any help from the Ugandan people. And you cannot keep saying that it's all right for a selective few that decided to start this movement and move us forward to continue to move this forward, and you ride on our shoulders. Because what's going to eventually happen is there are going to be so many of you on our shoulders that we will no longer be able to carry ourselves through this, because we start to carry the weight of every Ugandan. And you cannot ask that of a few people who sincerely see the strength we have in numbers right now. The strength we have. We've sat together for months before Voice of Uganda Radio was ever dreamt of, before FADU was ever dreamt of, before we decided to go public with this was ever thought of. We had to do all the logistics. We had to do everything legally. We had to file all the papers. We had to make sure that everything was done in the proper way, that there would be no repercussion back on us at all. So what you sit back and enjoy on the weekends has been a lot has had to happen to get us to this point. And a lot continues to happen to get us to this point. And a lot has funded these programs up until this point. So I say to you, my fellow Ugandans, if we have set up a board of people that we can look at everything from one perspective, not from the past, not from the future, but the direction that we all go together united. Somewhere you've got to come on board, and you have to trust this, and you have to get on board to start making things happen forward. Because I promise you, when you come on board and you start helping things move forward, you will hear about these things. We may be able to help teachers, and teachers may say they may not want their names talked about on the radio or whatever, but we will encourage them. Send us emails, send us comments, so that we can read back to let the people know that you are thankful for what has happened and what you have been given. And there are people you don't even know of that are ready to stand up with their shoulders back, and they don't even care. Anna Adek is one of those people. The president-elect there at the guild-elect there at McCary University is one of those such people that I'm talking about. And the reason I say that is because some of the things that she has talked about on the air has made me nervous for her. But she stands in who she is. She stands on the rights that her fellow students, her classmates voted her into a position, and they trust her. And she's taken that trust, and she's working for the students there at the university. And she's taken that trust, and she's listening to what's going on with the teachers and the strikes. And she's listening to the younger generation. And she's listening to everyone who's feeling like now they have a platform with her. There are a lot of people in Uganda that have more courage than some of the Ugandans that are outside of the country. And I'm not saying that to put anyone down, because I don't mean it in that way. But what I'm saying is the people inside are tired. The people inside are hurting. The people inside are struggling. The people inside are hungry. The people inside need medical treatment. They need a government that's working for them. They don't want the trickery of being taken off into an army. Girls applying, these women and these young girls who have finished at the universities and are told they're applying for positions, that they're going to be taken out to work and go out to interview. And they're taken out and they're made into sex slaves for the military men, or they're made into sex slaves for whatever purpose. So please don't think that the trickery is only happening with those that they're trying to sign up to go into the military to fight. The trickery is there for these young women also, that think that they're going off for interviews, that think that they're going off for job offering somewhere, and they get there and their family members never hear from them again. And there's no accountability, because the family members can't even go to the police and say, this person is missing. We don't know where she's at. We don't know what has happened. Can you help us? There is no help. There is no help inside of Uganda. We are the hope for the people inside of Uganda, and we can no longer sit on our hands and say, I'm going to leave it to somebody else to start us rolling. We here at Voice of Uganda, we here at FADU.org have already started that rolling. FADU.org is already set up. Click on the registration button and register. I'm going to go out there this week and look at those numbers, because that's a part of what I do. I don't just work I don't just have 2 programs on the radio, but I work a lot behind the scenes, sending letters to senators, especially Senator Coons, sending letters to the people that I need to get the voice of the Ugandan people out there. You would be amazed at all the emails that go out to CNN, to all the different groups out within CNN to talk about the issues, for them to start to say, is this woman crazy, or maybe we need to start paying attention to her? Because it's important to me, because of the people that are in Uganda. I don't worry about the Ugandans that are outside of the country. I love the Ugandans that are outside of the country, because yes, we need the Ugandans that are outside of the country. But my heart and my passion lies with the people that are inside of the country still. No one should have to go to bed hungry. No one should have to, with a job in Uganda, should have to figure out how they're going to have money to get to work, how they're going to have money to pay their utilities, how they're going to have money to pay their tuition, how they're going to have money to eat, and they have a job. And that job is not even paying them enough money to have the life and to have the structure of what they need there in Uganda. My compassion lies with the Ugandans that are inside. You take a woman in Uganda who is in labor to a hospital, that she has no idea that the water they're using to clean her baby up and to clean her up with came from a swamp or a river out in the back, and that water was boiled so that there's no bacteria in it. But how clean does that really make the water? And this is the water that is used on the future leaders of Uganda, the new generation of Uganda being born into the hospitals there. And we outside of Uganda say it is okay for our newborn babies, because they are our babies. They are my babies. They are our babies. And we say that it's okay for these children to be cleaned up with water that is coming from outside in a swamp and being boiled, to wash them and welcome them into the world. We start them out that way. I mean, when is this going to end? And why do we tell the president that it's okay for him to treat the people this way? Because that is what we're telling him if we continue on the route that we're going. That is exactly what we're telling him, that it is okay. Everybody is fighting for democracy. When power changes over, it is for true democracy. What my dream is for Uganda, because I am going to be a part of that new generation of Ugandans that go back into Uganda to develop the country and make it whole again. And yes, I've said I am going to move to Uganda someday. I want to be a part of the movement and the new democracy. Because it's what we're fighting for. We're fighting for democracy. And all of the Ugandans that are outside, you have law degrees, you have teaching degrees, you are nurses, you are doctors, you are professors, you understand the legalities of life. You have worked in offices in a political arena. You understand the way a democracy works. You understand. We have accountants. We have so many people outside that have so much to give to the country, and those jobs will be there. And those jobs will be there for people because we need to build the country back up. We need to get the youth in Uganda working. We need to bring jobs in. Microsoft just signed a huge deal with South Africa that could have been signed right there in Uganda to put 300 unemployed South African students to work. And all they're doing is they're being trained to build this little chip that will be sent out of South Africa back into the United States that will go into laptops. And all these people that they hired don't even have IT degrees. All they needed to have was a degree. And over the next 3 years, all of those students will have full-time jobs with Microsoft. These are the things that would go to Uganda if it was transparent. And if the government wasn't there with their hands out for corruption. This government, if it doesn't benefit them, if they can't make money off of it, then they don't want the Ugandan people to make money. Now, I tell you, my fellow Ugandans, if Ugandans want to work to have a life, who are we to tell them that they can't? And who are we to stop these companies from coming in? Because my fellow Ugandans that are listening, and if Anna Adek is listening today, these are the things that the students need to know. This is why they have the Black Monday for standing up for corruption in Uganda, because these companies are here. These companies went to India when Gandhi fought for the Indian people. It was 10 years, almost 15 years, but those companies start going into India and developing. India has more American companies than any other country because the big thing for India was put the Indian people to work, give them jobs and allow them to support themselves. And the country thrives because of that. Is there still unemployment in India? Of course there is. Is there still poverty and is there still people hungry and things going on? Well, of course there is. But when you have a society of people that are educating themselves at the level that Ugandans, the youth of Ugandans are doing, they are educating themselves for the future because they know that we will liberate them and they know that we will come in and we will help to bring that country back on its feet. The new government under democracy will welcome anyone in. Of course, you have to meet all the laws and the regulations of coming in, but we will bring anyone in that is going to put Ugandans to work, to give them a chance to have a decent life, to give them a chance to have a decent life. It's all the Ugandans are asking. Right now in Uganda, and you know this, those of you who are outside of Uganda, and especially the ones that are inside of Uganda, in the United States of America, you cannot come in here and just set up a business and say, I'm going to come from Switzerland and I'm going to open up my own company here. There's rules, there's regulations, and a lot of times you have to be a citizen here. But there's guidelines and there's things that have to happen and things that have to take place. But yet we know in Uganda right now, from the Chinese community to the Indian community, they have more businesses and there are more entrepreneurs in Uganda than there are Ugandans. And the country belongs to the Ugandans. Yet the government will allow these people to come in and set up and do whatever they want and continue to use the Ugandan people. I'm telling you, my fellow Ugandans on the outside, the Ugandans inside are fighting for their lives, and the government is not doing anything to help them. So if we continue to sit on our hands on the outside, what are we doing? Ugandans should be able to be entrepreneurs. They should have their own businesses. They should have the market on these different things that are being set up and that are being done. The majority, not the majority, but all, and I do mean all of the Asian people that are here that are business and entrepreneur people, they are American citizens. Because I had told you once when we had shared about boycottings that had happened in the United States of America, one of the boycotts that happened was with the Chinese people as they migrated into the U.S. and they didn't feel like their civil liberties and justice were upheld, and they were being mistreated, and they were given jobs and not paid well, and they felt like slaves in a country that welcomed them in as immigrants. And they stood up in the United States of America and they fought for their rights. But when you live in a true democracy, that's what happens. If you welcome these people in and you say they're a part of the democracy, then you have to give them their rights as well. Because they were feeling that they were discriminated against, the same as the African Americans were discriminated against as well. In Uganda, the only people that are being discriminated against are the Ugandan people. And the same rights that we give the Asian people, the Asian Americans, we give them those rights because they are Asian Americans. Are those Asians that in Uganda, are they Ugandan citizens? Can they say that they're Asian Ugandans? I mean, really, are they citizens, or are they just coming there living off of the system the way everybody else is living off the system, and Ugandans fall in trap time and time and time and time again? Because I guarantee you the Indians and the Asians in Uganda are eating well, their children are being educated, and they don't have any problems. And what you have is a society of people, which are the Ugandan people, that are still in turmoil. In their own country, they're not free, but we're giving the freedoms and liberties and justice to the people who are guests in their homeland. Because if you're not a Ugandan citizen, you are a guest. And when you're a guest in someone's house, you need to treat that person's house with respect. If any of you who are listening to my voice is invited into my home as a guest, you need to treat my home with respect, because that's what you are. You're a guest. Yet the Asian people and the Indian people, they treat the Ugandans as if the country is not even theirs. And you're going to tell me that that is okay? This is 2013 that we're living in, and people in Uganda are still living like we lived in 1800s when President Lincoln became president and had to fight for us to be freed from slavery. We are enslaving a group of people in their own country in 2013, and this is their country, and the government is allowing everybody to come in and treat these people however they want to. This is what's happening with the immigrants that the government's getting ready to bring in now. These new immigrants that they're bringing in from China, I think it is China that they're bringing them in for. And they're going to allow these people, after so much time, they're going to give these people loans to set up businesses and start their lives in another country. What about your own people? What about the people of Uganda? Why are these people not worthy of having those jobs and those loans to set up and start their own businesses? Here you have your youth, you have the Ugandan youth that are asked to pay 60 and 70% of their tuition up front. This is money that they don't have. Why isn't their government working to make things easier for them? But when the new people that are migrating into Uganda are going to get all these rights and liberties over the people who are true Ugandans. And I don't care whether you come from the north, south, the east, or west. We're talking about all Ugandans here. I don't care what university you're in. We're talking about all Ugandans here. That you could bring other people in and treat them better than their own people. And we as Ugandans outside, we can no longer sit aside and say it's okay for the government to treat our families this way. Because let me tell you what happens to us on the outside. We sent, let's say we almost sent $600 million to Uganda last year. And are our families better off because we sent that money, or are they in the same position and we're still working hard outside of the country to give them a better life, but we continue to flood money into them and they're in the same situation? Can any of us honestly say, can any of us honestly say that? I mean, if we can, call me, because I want to hear from you. And I only have 5 minutes left on the air. But can any of us say that from over $600 million that we flooded into Uganda last year, can we say that our families are better off and moving forward with that much money that we flooded into the country? But we have to, the Voice of Uganda Radio and FADU is set up so that we start to make change. We can no longer send that kind of money into a country that we don't see any outcomes. And our money, yes, our hard-earned and worked for money is making the lives of the Asians and the Indians and the government richer. But it's not doing anything for our families. Our families are still sick and are having to go to these hospitals that are not fit. Our families are hungry. Our families cannot be educated. I mean, our families are having problems in a system that we have flooded $600 million into. My family, support the radio station. I'm telling you, I sit on the board, and your monies will be put to use, and we will share what is happening with your monies and with your funds. Everybody listening to my voice right now, if you got, when this program went off, if you went out there and pledged $5, you would be amazed at what we can do with that amount of money from the mass amount of people that listen to this radio program. Go to voiceofugandaradio.com, and there's a link there to click for donations. And nobody knows who you are. It's just as safe as going to Amazon.com. It's just as safe as shopping online. It's just as safe as everything else you're doing in life. But we can no longer set aside and say that these things are okay. Dr. Martin Luther King, if he would not have fought for the rights of coloreds to bring us forward to where we are today, where would we be in the United States of America? And under the true democracy, under the United States of America, Asians, Latinos, blacks, the Netherlands, from Switzerland, everywhere, we are melting pot. We invite everyone in. Iran, Afghanistan, you name it. We are a huge melting pot. And those people, when they come here and they pledge of allegiance to this country, they become a citizen with the same rights that I have, the same rights that anyone in the United States of America has. And these are the rights, and these are the liberties, and these are the justices that we're fighting for our Ugandan family, for the youth of Uganda. My show is getting ready to wind up and come to an end here. Please join me. If you go out to Voice Uganda Radio, the schedule has changed of the programs. So you might want to go out there and take a look at that so you will understand and know where the new programs are going to fall in on our lineup. We gave some programs a little bit more time, and then we switched some programs around because we've given Anna Adek, the president-elect there, Guild president-elect there at McCary University, we've given her a platform to speak out on Sundays. So I will no longer be coming on at 3 o'clock on Sundays. My show on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock will still be the same for the American Connection. But on Sundays, I will start to come on at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I will be on from 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock because in Uganda it will be 2 o'clock there. We're giving a platform now to the Ugandan people because when my show comes on, it's a lot later for them. We're giving a platform for the youth there and for those who wanted to be a part of the program there. And Anna Adek will be a part of that program every Sunday. We will be talking about issues that are currently in the paper. We'll be talking about issues that are going on with the students there at the universities, not just her university, but other ones as well. We'll talk about what's going on with the youth, still stay on to what's going on with the teachers, but we'll always stay within the current events of what's happening and what's going on. So I really encourage you on Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. We'll be on from 8 to 10. It is going to be very powerful and it's going to be very moving. We decided that that's where I'm at, is giving a platform here to Voice of Uganda Radio. It's for change. And my change is, if this is going to help give a platform there in Uganda so we get more people on board that can listen and be a part of it, then that's what I want to do. And I encourage you to be a part of that and support that in whatever way you can. Please, please, please go out there this week, FADDU.org, become a member. That is going to give us the the power that we need on the floor when we start going to the Senate to fight for rights and things for those that are fighting for things there in Uganda. So please go out to FADU, FADDU.org, become a member. I'm going to track those numbers this week and see how many people go out there and do that. I'm going to track those numbers this week and see how many people go out there and just pledge their $5. I tell you, we've got to help the Ugandans. We can no longer sit on our hands and say that we're not a part of the movement. And if you only give $5 and you never give anything else until you start to see change, give your $5 and sit back and watch what your $5 does. But you've got to start somewhere. Thank you so very much for being a part of Freedom at Hand here. I have been your host, Miss Brenda, for these 2 hours. I hope that this has been very informative and really helped to shed some light on and help you to just understand what needs to happen and how we need to move forward. Sometimes I say my program is it gives everybody a little bit of time to calm down after some of the other shows that get a little more involved. But I thank you so much for being a part of my listening audience. And being a participant. I do see my numbers, and I know that you're out there, and I know that you are around the world, globally around the world, and I thank you so very much for your support. God bless you until next week. I will see you on Wednesday for the American Connection, which will be coming on from 10 to 12 on Wednesday, so please be a part of that program. And like I say, visit us at Voice of Uganda Radio. Look at the new lineup. The new lineup is only for Sunday. All the other programs are all staying the same. Nothing else has changed. It's just only the Sunday lineup that's changing a little bit. God bless you. God bless you all. Thank you so much for being a part of the program today.